This case concerned consort Lishu. Jinshi wondered how to begin the conversation. A ghost has appeared in the chambers of one of the other consorts. My goodness, the red-haired lady exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. Hongyang pressed a hand to her forehead as if to say again. Maomao noticed that Jinshi had come straight to the point. She appreciated that he didn't beat around the bush. Jyokai was sharp enough to almost certainly figure out whom he was referring to. How terrible! Which consort is it? I must pay her a visit to make sure she is all right. Lady Jyokai, you cannot go outside in your state. Oh no. Then perhaps I can send someone in my place. You and Maomao could go together, or if you are busy, perhaps I could send Yinghua with her. Making sure she was all right was likely the last thing on Jyokai's mind. She simply wanted the juicy details. There was no point in hiding Lishu's identity now. The truth would come out as soon as Sekiyu opened her mouth. Jinshi had to know that, but perhaps wanting to get back at Jyokai, he replied, Consort Jyokai, this is a matter of utmost secrecy. I must ask you not to visit her or send anyone. Might you return her to me again? I might be able to lend her to you. The object of all this returning and lending was, of course, Maomao. She, Gaoshun, and Hongyang all sighed at once. Were they going to see a repeat of last time? No, I want you to return her to me, this girl right here. Maomao. Jinshi stood in front of Maomao and pressed a finger down on her head. He let it slide down her hair. And when she gets back, I believe you will find you get no information out of her. His hand brushed her cheek. His pinky and ring fingers floated across her lips, because I have taken pains to keep her quiet. Then he left the room, walking with an impossibly elegant gait. Gaoshun, openly shocked, followed him. The other people in the room looked at Maomao with their mouths agape. She wore much the same expression as they did. It was Jyokai who spoke first. What happened between you two? Her gaze, still shell-shocked, settled on Maomao. Maomao found the look downright painful. Jyokai proceeded to interrogate her for the next 30 minutes, but Maomao would say only it was the frog's fault. She was starting to think that a few ox bezoars had been too cheap a price for a secret she would have to carry to her grave. Maomao wondered what kind of apparition this ghost was. She really did not believe in such things. There was the incident at the scary story gathering some time ago, but Maomao did not know if anything supernatural had happened then. Yinghua, however, was convinced it had been a ghost, and Maomao did not argue with her. Call them spirits or whatever else, it did not matter. Maomao did not believe people could be killed by malign supernatural forces. When someone died, there was always a reason. That reason could be poison or injury or sickness. To the extent that a curse or something like it ever killed anyone, Maomao believed it was only because the person drove themselves to illness. They did this through their own belief that they were a victim of such forces. In any event, Maomao found herself accompanying Jinshi to the Diamond Pavilion. She thought this did not necessarily need his personal attention. Perhaps Gaoshun or someone like him could have handled it perfectly well, but she might be wrong. When they arrived at the Diamond Pavilion, located in its bamboo grove, they were met by the chief lady in waiting alone. When the other ladies realized Jinshi was there, they quickly brushed the dust from their clothes. They ran their fingers through their hair and stood in a line at the pavilion entrance. Jinshi looked at them with a smile. Maomao could feel a nasty scowl coming on, but Gaoshun looked at her with a calm and gentle gaze. He knew Jinshi had not been quite himself since they returned from the hunt. He had asked her many questions about it, but she wasn't sure how much she should say. She had given only ambiguous answers. Did Gaoshun know Jinshi was not a eunuch? Could he himself be another exception to the rule? Convinced that thinking about all of that wouldn't get her anywhere, Maomao simply followed them into the Diamond Pavilion. Consort Lishu was entertainingly easy to read. Her face was pale when they arrived, but when she saw Jinshi, she promptly flushed red. Then, as they came to the matter at hand, the blood drained from her cheeks again. She may not be Maomao's mistress, but it was still a little alarming to realize someone like her was one of the 4 most important consorts. Perhaps that was one reason His Majesty hadn't taken her as a bedmate, Maomao thought. She pictured the Emperor as a thoughtful and perceptive man, but then she decided it was probably because his bust size did not excite his appetites. Lishu fell shorter of His Majesty's preferred 90 centimeters than Maomao did. This way, please. The chief lady in waiting spoke for her pale mistress. Many other ladies-in-waiting followed them, but they mostly focused on Jinshi. To be blunt, they were somewhat in the way. One could also say it was like a beautiful flower surrounded by butterflies. The ladies-in-waiting were much noisier than butterflies. The overall effect was more like a cloud of flies buzzing around a fish head. If they knew he wasn't a eunuch, Maomao didn't even want to think about it. As she thought he ought to hurry up and chop it off, not a very ladylike idea to be sure, they arrived in the bathing area. Jinshi and the other eunuchs paused for a moment. It was always the eunuchs who brought the hot water for the bath, so there seemed to be no problem. Here, the chief lady-in-waiting stopped before the changing room. Consort Lishu stood some distance away, afraid of getting too close. The consort says she was standing here when she witnessed a mysterious figure. She gestured toward the changing room window. There was nothing visible beyond it, only a blank wall. A storage room could be seen beyond the window, however. Usually the window was covered with a bamboo screen, but it happened to be open. The consort happened to glance through it. "Can you describe the figure to me?" Maomao looked at Lishu, who was clutching her skirt and looking at the ground. It made her seem very young. She did not have the authority one would expect from a consort. "Are you still talking about that?" asked one of the ladies-in-waiting. She seemed inspired by her mistress's timid manner. "You are so desperate for attention, Lady Lishu." "I am sure it is nothing to worry about. You must have been seeing things." The woman stepped forward importantly, adding a flirtatious glance at Jinshi for good measure. She was pretty women of the rear palace were, almost by definition, but there was a dangerous glint in her eyes. Her use of eyeliner emphasized it. She said, "I should think it the duty of a chief lady-in-waiting to admonish her mistress for such behavior," shaking her head and sighing. The other ladies-in-waiting clustered around her, almost falling into line behind her. The chief lady-in-waiting seemed to shrink into herself. Aha, Maomao thought, the haughty woman must have been the former chief lady-in-waiting. It must have bothered her to be demoted in favor of the food taster. She likely teased her in this way every day. Jinshi, who could easily figure that out just like Maomao, smiled and walked toward the proud lady. He said, "You speak the truth." He continued, "But it is my duty to listen when a consort has something to say. Please do not take the chance to do that duty away from me." His voice was as sweet as nectar, and the ladies-in-waiting could only nod in agreement with whatever he said. Most of the ladies of the rear palace were, let us say, inexperienced with men. This made their reactions to them amusingly easy to read. Jinshi then added softly that he wished to drink some tea. This was an effective strategy for clearing the room. The ladies-in-waiting all but stumbled over themselves to be the one to prepare his drink. In fact, another lady-in-waiting had already prepared tea long before. They simply did not know that. He really did know how to do his job. "Now, milady, might you be so good as to tell me what is on your mind?" Thus mollified by Jinshi, consort Lishu lay down on her couch and finally began to speak. "I went to take my bath just like normal. I prefer water that is lukewarm, but my ladies always make the water quite hot. Because of this, I bathe somewhat late, to give the water time to cool down. Lately, I have begun to think that my ladies-in-waiting are not especially fond of me. But at least they do not complain about my bathing alone. This has been my practice ever since my time in the convent. I am only accompanied when changing my clothes, and for this I have the help of Kanan. That is to say, my chief lady-in-waiting. It happened when I had finished my bath and had gone into the changing room. I felt a little overheated while drying myself off. I raised the blind. The window was closed, so not much air came through. Then I saw a flicker. At first I thought it might be the curtain flapping in the breeze, but it was not. I had closed the window before getting in the bath. There shouldn't have been any breeze, yet the curtain was flapping, so I looked over and then I saw it. A big round face was floating there, flickering and dancing. It was using the curtain like a robe. The face was smiling. And the entire time it looked straight at me. The very memory was clearly fear-inducing. Lishu hugged herself and trembled as she lay on the couch. Kanan rubbed her shoulders gently. Wow, she used to be so mean to her. Maomao reflected that people really could change as she sipped her tea. The tea Jinshi had requested had not yet arrived. There seemed to be an argument about who would have the privilege of bringing it to him. Almond cookies accompanied the tea, a rather cosmopolitan snack. They were crispy and seemed like they would keep well. Maomao kept glancing at Kanan, wondering if she might be able to wheedle a few cookies out of her as a souvenir. Do you think there could have been someone in the area? Jinshi was asking. Might you have seen a palace woman and thought she was a spirit? Lishu and Kanan both shook their heads. Kanan was with me, Lishu said. She came running when she heard me shout and she saw the ghost too. Apparently, despite her fear, Kanan had approached the round-faced apparition. She hoped to determine its true identity. But then the ghost disappeared. There was no one around, of course. The curtain was as still as if it had never moved. The window was shut too. That room doesn't get much air through it. Maomao hummed and put her hands together, looking at the location Lishu had described. The layout seemed strange to her. Who would build a storeroom next to a bath? At the Jade and Crystal pavilions, the bath was in a separate structure. There was an adjoining room where the consort could relax after her soak. The bath was not separate in the Diamond Pavilion, but a relaxing space seemed more appropriate than a storage area beside it. She almost glanced at Jinshi, but decided to look at Gaoshun instead. He was looking at Jinshi, concern evident on his face. Jinshi waved at them. Maomao took that as permission to ask what she had been thinking. Has this always been a storage room? She said. She could not shake the feeling that there was a more important question to ask, but she decided to start with the first thing that came to mind. No, it did not used to be, Kanan said. Then why is it now? Well, Kanan stood looking a little uncomfortable. He moved to the storage room across from the bath. She pointed inside, among the rows of shelves and piles of miscellaneous objects. Ah, I see, said Maomao. She spotted black marks on the wall. Upon closer inspection, she discovered it was mold. Once it had taken root like this, it would require more than a little scrubbing to get rid of it. Being near the bath likely caused humidity in this area. However, the Jade and Crystal pavilions did not have issues with mold. The ladies in waiting of the Jade Pavilion would have investigated to discover the source of the problem and then taken care of it. Such dedication was not always seen from the women of the Diamond Pavilion. Indeed, the ladies of the Jade Pavilion were somewhat exceptional in their diligent cleaning. In this case, they had decided to sweep the problem under the rug, so to speak. They simply turned the room into a storage area. However, the problem went beyond a little mold. In places, the wall was soft and springy when touched. It might even be rotted clear down to the foundations. I wouldn't have said this building was that old. It's not. It was built when Lady Lishu first entered the rear palace. Maomao frowned. Could the structure have gotten so unstable in such a short time? Then she noticed a window directly next to the rotted part. This was the curtain Lishu had mentioned flapping. Stroking her chin, Maomao went over to the bathing area. She went through the changing room and peered into the cypress wood bathtub. There it is. The words had escaped her lips almost before she knew it. She had found a small round hole at the bottom of the tub. A plug sat to the side of the tub. The rear palace had been built over an old sewer system, one of its great conveniences, and the drain no doubt led to it. In her mind's eye, Maomao sketched the location of the bath in relation to the storage room. Then she added in the flow of the sewers. Then she said Lady Lishu and looked at the consort. On that day, did you perhaps accidentally pull out the stopper in the tub? Lishu blinked. How did you know? Now Maomao was sure. She walked briskly back over to the mold-infested wall, then tried to move a shelf so she could get a better look at the rotten floor. She was not strong enough to do it alone, but Gaoshun, who was very perceptive, quickly came over and helped her. Moving the shelf revealed a spot on the floor that was so soft, it looked like it might give way if she jumped on it. A crack had formed between the floor and the wall. Maomao asked if it would be possible to check a blueprint to see whether the sewer ran directly under that spot. Gaoshun responded promptly to her request, as he often did. He told another eunuch to bring a blueprint of the Diamond Pavilion. Just as Maomao had suspected, the sewer system ran directly under the floor of the storage room. She said, with hot water passing just under the floor and steam coming up from it, it would naturally make this wall prone to rot. She continued, and if some of the steam were to slip out of this crack, it could produce a breeze even with the window closed. That explained the flapping of the curtain. Consort Lishu looked at Maomao with her mouth open, but then her eyes widened and she said, "But then, how do you explain that round face?" Maomao hummed thoughtfully and stroked her chin again. She looked at where the curtain was, and the place where she thought Lishu had seen the face. Then she turned around slowly in that spot. With the wall behind her, she noticed a shelf at a diagonal from where she stood. It held something covered with a cloth. She approached and removed the covering to reveal a brass mirror. It looked awfully well polished for something left in a storage room. It still had some shine even now. "That's yes, ma'am." Lishu looked at the ground. "That is very important to me. Please be careful with it." It wasn't as if Maomao had intended to break it. However, she refrained from touching it. Instead, she stared at the mirror's surface. It was almost exactly the size of a human face. "How long has this been here?" she asked. "Since the new mirror arrived with the special envoys. I used it all the time before that. It was put here when we got the new one." The envoys had brought the consort's full-length glass mirrors. These mirrors showed much more than this brass plate and far more clearly. There was no comparison and no reason not to put this one away in storage. "And yet it appears to have been polished every day," Maomao remarked. Brass clouded quickly. For the mirror to remain so reflective, it must have been cared for frequently. Lishu regarded the mirror with a certain lonesomeness. She seemed far more attached to it than to the new gift. "Since we have it out, take a look inside it," Maomao suggested. She took the mirror, being careful to hold it with the cloth, and gave it to Lishu. "It will be easiest to see if you make sure there is plenty of light." So saying, Maomao opened the curtain, letting in the sun from outside. The highly polished mirror caught the light and reflected it. "It might be clearest if you hold it like this." Maomao adjusted the position of the mirror in the consort's hands. The light struck the brass surface, then reflected onto the white wall. Everyone present reacted with astonishment. The light formed a perfect circle on the wall, and a smiling woman's face floated within it. Jinchi was the first to speak. "What is this?" He stared fixedly at the wall as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Now I get it," Maomao thought. "I had heard of so-called magic mirrors, but this is the first time I have seen one," she said. These were bronze mirrors that seemed truly magical. When light struck them, they reflected either an image or a message. They were sometimes also called transparent mirrors because light seemed to make them see-through when it hit them. They had a long history, though very specialized techniques were required to make them. Maomao's adoptive father, Liu Hemen, had a wide-ranging knowledge that extended well beyond drugs and medicine. Ever since she was small, he had regaled Maomao with intriguing stories and surprising facts, and this had been one of them. Presumably, the cloth had simply come off the mirror that night. The polished surface of the mirror had caught the moonlight and projected its image on the wall. The result was a floating face. It was a ghost created by pure coincidence. This face Lishu sniffled, ignoring the tears running down her cheeks as she looked at the mirror. "It looks like my poor, deceased mother somehow." She clutched the bronze plate tightly, her lips twisting with distress and snot pouring from her nose. It truly took away from the authority a consort should have. However, it also suited her very well. This girl was one of the Emperor's 4 ladies. Really, at her age, she should still have been growing up. Now Maomao understood why she cherished that mirror so much. It reminded her of her mother. Perhaps the consort had hoped to make her daughter feel that even in the rear palace far away, she was always at her side. Maomao herself did not really know what a mother was, but it was clearly something so important that it inspired deeply felt emotions in this consort. Still dripping snot indecorously, Lishu clung to the mirror. The image on the wall had vanished, but she could still see that gentle smile in her mind. "I wonder if Mother is angry that I changed mirrors. Maybe that is why she appeared. It was simply coincidence, milady," Maomao said dispassionately. "I am told that she loved dancing. Giving birth to me damaged her body and she could no longer dance. She died without ever dancing again. I wonder if she returned as a ghost to dance now. There are no ghosts." Lishu seemed not to hear Maomao's cold statement. Kanan took out a handkerchief and began wiping her mistress's face. The scene lost some of its sadness when someone announced, "Your tea is ready, sir." It appeared the former chief lady-in-waiting had won the struggle to deliver the drink. She arrived carrying fragrant tea and snacks. She offered Jinchi an obsequious smile, but when she saw her sobbing mistress, her expression twisted into contempt. She quickly regained her smile and slowly approached the consort. "Lady Lishu, what are you crying for? You should be embarrassed making such a display in front of these people." She looked like a diligent servant, scolding her revered lady. However, it was not enough to hide her true feelings from Maomao. The way she adopted her finest manners for these important men, and then quickly returned to her usual self when they were gone, was no better than a third-rate courtesan. And like many women of that kind, she knew a weakness when she saw one. "Oh my," the lady-in-waiting said, looking at the bronze mirror. "Do we still have this mirror?